So you promote Astrid in Path of Radiance, and you get to choose a new weapon type for her to use. And this is presented as an actual, unbiased choice where, theoretically, each type is a compromise. You got swords with high accuracy, low weight, low might, axes with high might, high weight, low accuracy, and lances being something in the middle. The same goes for magic where light is the accurate one, dark is the strong one, and anima is the middle ground. And when Ias was making Path of Radiance, there wasn't necessarily supposed to be a right answer. Except there kinda is. Axes have the highest might, and since accuracy is hardly an issue on the player's side, they really are sort of the meta choice. This isn't exclusive to Path of Radiance either. Put into practice, the accuracy and weight differences rarely come into play. If you look at Blazing Blade and Awakening, Axes and sometimes Dark Magic tend to be the best option because of their higher might. Then there's the game where the differences do matter. Binding Blade, where axes are so inaccurate only characters with really high skill like Marcus can really use them. And this causes most players to opt for swords because, generally, people like higher odds. So if one weapon type is usually the most favorable, why have the option in Path of Radiance to choose a new weapon type in the first place? Are lances superfluous since, even though they have 1-2 range, axes just have higher might? Now this is where the weapon triangle is supposed to come into play. It's supposed to encourage the use of different weapons since, for example, you're not supposed to throw a lance user into a pack of enemies that have axes mixed into them. You're supposed to fight different types of enemies with the weapon type that counters them. But the weapon triangle only makes a big difference in genealogy and heroes. In genealogy, the weapon triangle advantage is at its highest being 20%, whereas heroes is basically entirely balanced around the triangle. This is sort of the case in Fates as well, where every bit of damage helps to reach benchmarks, but you don't see might bonuses until B rank. So how many times have you seen a horde of axe fighters, and instead of calculating how much damage each of them does, you just plop your Myrmidon on the fort and call it a day? The weapon triangle sometimes serves as a substitute for calculations in decision making, rather than being an additional factor. The other thing about the weapon triangle is that while it's not always in your favor, only you can take advantage of it. You can bait an axe fighter with your sword cav, but the enemy can't do that since you just attack them with the best weapon matchup anyways. Even if the weapon triangle isn't all that impactful sometimes, why wouldn't you use it if it doesn't hurt you? So besides the weapon triangle, why do different weapon types exist? Let's say you get a Brave Lance. Big damage, many attacks go burr. But not everyone in your army can use it, only the lance users can. And this lets the map designers take into account both what weapons the player will have at that point, and who can use them. The best example being Thracia 776 with Finn's Brave Lance and the Brave Axe, and how they let you capture things more easily. Three Houses is a special case where you're encouraged to try out different weapon types to unlock new classes and combat arts. So even though the lower accuracy of axes isn't enough to make a difference, there's still reasons to not just throw axes on everybody and call it a day. Lastly, it's personally more satisfying to have with the first party. Three Houses gets a lot of flack for being Wyvern Lord spam, but at least you can have Wyvern Lords that can use Curve Shot, right? How many times have you heard the phrase, there's too many sword users in Smash? While I don't personally agree with this notion, Smash isn't a game designed only around disjointed hitbox and other sort of like properties like, for example, Guilty Gear XX. There's also fighters that exclusively use their fists, or are more projectile based. Violet gets a lot of praise for bringing axes and lances to the table, even though it's more an aesthetical thing, and you could probably make those attacks work with swords. So even the weapon triangle or the different properties of weapon types aren't always well implemented, different weapon types are probably here to stay, even if the weapon triangle comes and goes, simply because that's how it's always been since Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light. I mean, Fire Emblem would seem pretty boring if the main characters only ever use swords, right?